Nikki Haley is out, so the scramble for her voters, or at least for Trump-fatigued Republicans, is on between Biden and Trump. We can all help. We'll talk about how. Also, breaking news, some guy named Dean Phillips was apparently running for president as a Democrat. We know this because he just dropped out too. So we're officially in the general election now. Where do we stand? What should you focus on when discussing it? What are the next big moments in this campaign season? Trump is trying to outrun the law, which is to say he's trying to get back in the White House before he gets sent to the big house. And right now, that strategy seems to be on track. We'll be joined by Tristan Snell, the prosecutor who beat Donald Trump in the Trump University case, to weigh in on the legal side. Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who vote for progress in every election and want to convince their conservative friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54.
Jason, the general election begins today. Dean Phillips out, Nikki Haley out. Let's go to a speech that she just made, I think about an hour ago.
But the time has now come to suspend my campaign. I said I wanted Americans to have their voices heard. I have done that. I have no regrets. And although I will no longer be a candidate, I will not stop using my voice for the things I believe in. Our national debt will eventually crush our economy. A smaller federal government is not only necessary for our freedom, it is necessary for our survival. The road to socialism is the road to ruin for America. Our Congress is dysfunctional and only getting worse. It is filled with followers, not leaders. Term limits for Washington politicians are needed now more than ever. Our world is on fire because of America's retreat. Standing by our allies in Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan is a moral imperative. But it's also more than that. If we retreat further, there will be more war, not less.
Well, a week ago, I was like, well, she sounds like, I was like very idealistic. She sounds like somebody who, when she drops out, maybe she won't endorse Trump. And then, I don't know, over the last few days, I've been thinking how silly that sounded. You were like, no way, man. Anyway, I don't know. The first half of that sounded a lot like somebody who's eventually going to endorse Trump.
First of all, what percentage of people who say I have no regrets have tons of regrets? I would say a pretty high percentage. Like, it's not a sentence you usually say if you have no regrets.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I suspect she probably regrets a lot about this campaign, but it was a good old college try. And here we are, Trump versus Biden general election, long general election. Biden welcomed Haley's supporters. What is it? What are you laughing and giggling about?
I was just thinking about where we're going after that. Go ahead, keep going.
It's like a gallows humor here. He said Donald Trump made it clear he doesn't want Nikki Haley supporters. I want to be clear, there's a place for them in my campaign. We can contrast that with Trump, who said Nikki Haley got trounced, all capitals, last night in record-setting fashion, despite the fact that Democrats, for reasons unknown, sometimes he does have interesting sophistication in his writing, I want to say. It's weird. For reasons unknown, are allowed to vote in Vermont.
He's really Vermont's going to be stuck in his craw for a long time.
It's just so random. For reasons unknown, are allowed to vote in Vermont and various other Republican primaries. Much of her money came from radical left Democrats, as did many of her voters, almost 50% according to the polls. At this point, I hope she stays in the quote-unquote race and fights it out until the end. I'd like to thank my family and friends in the great Republican Party for helping me to produce by far the most successful Super Tuesday in history. Biden is the enemy. He's destroying our country. Make America great again. That I would say in the pantheon of unhinged Trump tweets or truths is high, because it's not like laden with as many typos, and it just has it's like a true reflection of mental state. Like, it's a true mirror into his soul.
Yeah, he's just like, how dare anybody run against me, right?
But also jubilant. Like, I would say, it's like, I don't love the ones that are just straight up venom. I like the ones that are just like a measured reflection of a guy who's like probably like more well rested than we've caught him at various other points in this campaign.
Yeah, I think that's right. He also clearly doesn't think he needs to court Nikki Haley voters because, and I think this is probably right, that while there are, and that's why I phrased it this way in the intro, that while there are plenty of voters out there who are Republicans who wish the nominee wasn't Trump, I don't think there's like this huge contingent of Nikki Haley partisans, and which is why he feels comfortable just dancing on her political grave and not throwing her any flowers at all.
Well, big question is like what happens now with the Haley voters? Because, you know, a lot of the exit polls showed that they weren't voting necessarily for Haley, but against Trump. And when reporters went out and interviewed them, a lot of them were pretty clear on this fact. Let's go to this clip.
Anything but Trump.
That was your priority.
That's my priority.
Is that the biggest reason you supported Nikki Haley?
Yeah, I'd say.
Because of Donald Trump?
Yes. Yeah.
I would vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump in a heartbeat.
Republican, right? I am. What do you do in that event if he is the nominee and it's he and Joe Biden? What do you do? I vote for Joe Biden.
Hi, Nikki Haley.
I think Donald Trump is a threat to the well-being of our country.
If she drops out, would you be disappointed if she endorsed Trump?
If she does, I'll vote Democrat.
No.
That's all there is to it.
It's important to me to keep Trump out of office again. Project 2025, I've read it, I've studied it. It's scary, it's frightening.
I've lived in a constitutional democracy all my life. I want to remain that way, and I want my grandchildren to grow up in one, not a dictatorship.
And I'm curious, over the last two elections, have you voted Trump in the past? Was it something where you voted for him, you trusted him, and you were disappointed?
Yes, I voted for him in 2016. I am a registered Republican, and I regretted that vote almost immediately.
So, look, this is like porn for us, right? I mean, like it's like addictive, right? I mean, it's like a great drug. I mean, we could sit and watch Republicans say that they'll vote for Joe Biden all day long. Like this whole show could become dedicated to that if we could find enough people and people would watch. I don't know how many there are. I think that if you look at the results in 2020, there clearly were enough because there were plenty of Republicans who voted for Joe Biden. And I think what is a Nikki Haley voter? I think it's probably a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and voted for Joe Biden in 2020, but would prefer to vote for a Republican. Don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would love to see a sophisticated analysis of the 2020 electorate for Trump and how movable any of them are. Because we know that some of the 16 vote was. But the idea that you would see a whole presidency of Donald Trump and then vote for him after that over Biden when Biden was as popular as he was in that election, the idea that now you've seen something, unless that something was January 6th, which could be an issue. Unfortunately, not for an issue for enough Republicans. That's the only thing I could think of. But like, I'm not that persuaded that there are too many of them. Obviously, we want to keep the door open for as many of them as possible. And I think those clips, although not representative of a huge number of people, are representative of a mindset that Democrats need to have, which is you can't have these like outrageous purity tests. You need to hold the door open for anybody and make the party as welcoming as possible for people who might not agree with you on a lot other than sort of like the health and future of our democracy, and make the party a welcoming place for them. You don't have to bend to them on policy or anything like that, but you at least need to allow them to feel like they have a place.
And clearly from Biden's statement, that's how he sees it, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing in his statement that's like, there are areas where we agree. He's like, look, we don't agree. But he's leaning into the idea that that's okay. That's kind of how it's supposed to work in America. We're supposed to be able to disagree in a way where we can still get along and get things done. And he's saying, so that's why I'm inviting you in. I mean, he even, as we see here on the screen, he even shared Trump's statement. He says, you don't have to agree with me on everything to know that MAGA extremism is a threat to this country. We need everyone on board, join our campaign. So he's going after these folks. I think a lot of these folks are people who probably voted for him in 2020, and he's trying to hold them and keep them in the boat. What I'm curious about is, look, Nikki Haley is probably eventually going to endorse Trump. It'll probably be very soft endorsement. She'll probably try to endorse him and then just not say anything and get out of there. But we know why. It's because she wants to be the nominee 4 years from now. and so it probably feels like she has to. I wonder how much of a difference that's going to make for Trump when she does, like assuming she doesn't go campaign with him and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the one of the things that I think we can count in our sort of advantage column heading into 2024, and it's too short of a column at the moment, but one of them is the sheer hubris that the Trump side is showing, like why that they would explicitly kill the immigration bill and be so open about it, that they would so openly kill the Ukraine aid, that he would, he, instead of courting Nikki Haley and her supporters, he calls her a bird brain. Now what he's counting on is enough momentum and enough, sort of hits to the battleship of Biden that he can do whatever he wants. He also counts on in a primary electorate that's going to support him no matter what. He's probably right about that part. And he also counts on the fact that all these Republican leaders will come back to him and grovel to him and do anything to get in his good graces, no matter how he treats them. And he's probably right about that too. So, but the one thing we've got is that, number one, Nikki Haley and her supporters are not the same. Like, a lot of them were voting for her because she was the only person left that would allow them to register a protest vote. And some of this other stuff he's doing is not going to sit well with the independent voters out there, like killing the immigration bill. So the hope, he's emboldened. The hope is that he's so emboldened that he ruins his chances. That's one of the best things we have going for us right now. Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's a big cash advantage here for Biden. So looking ahead to the general election, there's an estimated $2.7 billion that's expected to be spent just on the presidential campaign advertising this cycle. Pro-Biden super PACs, Future Forward and American Bridge already have committed to a blizzard of ads with $250 million and $200 million in spending respectively. Democrats are preparing an onslaught of ads to turn voters' attention away from Biden's age and remind them of Trump's chaotic first term and chaotic, spectating and commentating in this term. There was a memo that was released this morning, this is Wednesday, where the Biden campaign said that groups allied with it had committed to spending more than $700 million to help defeat Trump. So Biden and the DNC have a $41 million cash advantage over Trump and the RNC. And he's also benefited from, only having nominal primary challengers. So he's been able to rake in cash the whole time while Trump was spending it. So that's where we start with this. We can get into some of the other developments in a second, but look, this is not something, because this podcast is all about what can people do in their own social circles and everything. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on this. Usually in a presidential campaign, when people talk about the difference in the cash on one side and the other over the last 2 decades, usually I've been like, I don't think that's going to matter because it's going to level out. But and we'll get into this stuff more later in the show, but with Trump's legal difficulties and with there being plenty of people, I think, who may not want to commit to Trump, but are still Republicans, like donors, I think it might actually matter this time. Do you agree?
I'm not convinced. The question is matter enough, right? Yeah. Like on the fringe, it's worth,
not for persuasion, but for the ground game.
Yeah, I could be persuaded that it's a few tenths of a percentage point, maybe here and there. Like when we start talking about single-digit percentages, it just depends on how you spend that money and like how quality is the Biden team. There isn't really a lot of information out there about how good or bad this team behind Biden is. I certainly, I've been working in Democratic politics in some fashion most of my adult life, and they're a bit of a mystery to me. And there seems to be some frustration of the old guard. I would say that's not new. The old guard is always frustrated with the new guard, whoever they are. Like I remember when Pluff and Axe were running Obama's campaign, Carville and Begala were filling up Axe's inbox. So like that's part of like the way of doing business. But I'm not. It's not automatic that this money is going to matter. I imagine a lot of it's going to have to be used to just get the base out, given everything that's going on. Like, Biden, as we've, this is well-trod territory at this point. He's got a lot of work to shore up the base. I just did an interview with a former Republican congressman from Florida, Carlos Curbelo, who's like a never Trump Republican. And he was, talking about how the polling just came out showing that Trump is winning the Hispanic vote right now, which I think hasn't been covered enough, that he's kind of flipped those numbers, and he's been knocking a point at a time off of the black vote. He'll never get a majority of that vote, but he's sitting better than he's ever done there. You add that together with the issues in the Arab American community and young voters, and that's just a lot of money Biden's going to have to spend just to keep the base in some semblance of order.
And, I think it's also reflected in, like I talked to somebody who's a major fundraiser on the left the other day, and what they told me was that while they're raising lots of money successfully for Biden, that it's a slog, because everybody's like, yes, I know it's important. Okay, I'll write the check. But they're all like, we're doing this again. So you're seeing that enthusiasm gap reflected there too. All right, now we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about what Trump is attempting to do about this gap in cash. And it involves somebody we talk about on this show more than we'd like, Elon Musk. So when we come back, we're going to talk about that. And then a little later, we're going to get into the many, many developments on the legal side for Trump's campaign. So let's take a break and we'll come back and talk about that.
So let's face it. After a night of drinks, I don't bounce back the way I used to. And if you're as old as I am or more, you know what I'm talking about. And sometimes you have to make a choice. Either you have a great night or you have a great next day. And I've been facing that choice until I found Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol, probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD students to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. And it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme to break that byproduct down. And just remember, you can make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night, and then you could drink responsibly and you could feel your best the next day. It's amazing. I wish they had this when I was in college. So I first gave Z-Biotics a try when I was bringing in the new year, and I drank probably a little bit more than I should have. And the next day I felt great. I went out for a surf, and this is how it's going to be, right? This year, I want to form more sustainable and better drinking habits. I know so many of you want to do the same. And you don't have to take the all or nothing approach anymore. Z-Biotics will allow you to enjoy nights out in moderation while working towards your goals. So go to zbiotics.com/majority54 to get 15% off your first order when you use majority54 at checkout. That's Z-Biotics. And they're backed with 100% money back guarantees. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So remember to head to zbiotics.com/majority54 and use the code majority54 at checkout for 15% off. And thank you, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring this episode and for the good times.
Typical children's vitamins are basically candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy junk growing kids should never eat. That's why Hi-Ya was created, the pediatrician-approved superpowered chewable vitamin. While most children's vitamins are filled with 5 grams of sugar and can contribute to a variety of health issues, Hi-Ya is made with 0 sugar and 0 gummy junk, yet it tastes great and it's perfect for picky eaters. Hi-Ya fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets to provide the full body nourishment our kids need with a yummy taste they love. Formulated with the help of nutritional experts, Hi-Ya is pressed with a blend of 12 organic fruits and veggies, then supercharged with 15 essential vitamins and minerals, including vitamin D, B12, C, zinc, folate, and many others to help support immunity, energy, brain function, mood, concentration, teeth, bones, and more. It's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else you can imagine. Hi-Ya is designed for kids of all ages and sent straight to your door so parents have one less thing to worry about. It's also fun to say, Hi-Ya. As you know, I'm a father, and I'm always on the lookout for the best possible vitamins for my child to take. I'm so happy I've come across Hi-Ya Health. The ingredients are amazing, and I don't have to worry about sugar or gummy junk because Hi-Ya Health is made without that stuff, and it's still able to keep that great taste. We've worked out a special deal with Hi-Ya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hiyahealth.com/majority. This deal is not available on the regular website, so go to hiyahealth.com/majority and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults.
All right. Well, apparently Musk and Trump just met on Sunday in Palm Beach. And then Musk tweeted out, everybody thought this could lead to some money, but he said, just to be super clear, I'm not donating money to either candidate for US president. Now there's a little bit of speculation that the wording there could matter. Like he could still give to the PACs. I wouldn't put it past him. I also wouldn't put it past him just to change his mind. Like he's done that on a lot of things, including the purchase of the very company he sent that message out on, which was way more expensive of a 180 than anything we're contemplating here. And he's made it very clear he thinks that Biden's like a mortal threat to whatever vision of the country he has. But I mean, this belies the fact that Trump needs money, both for his legal battles, but also for presidential. And actually, those are the same thing. That's right. Presidential is his best bet at beating back these cases.
So here's my theory of what happened at this meeting. So at the meeting, he apparently it was not just meeting with Trump, but it was also some wealthy Republican donors. Yeah. And so I'm sure
Sachs and all these Florida guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure that they had some options as to what they were going to discuss. Obviously, if he were going to stroke a check, they would love that. Right. But look, if they were wanting him to, they're not going to ask him to give to the Trump campaign. They're going to ask him to give to the PACs because they're going to want large donations, large soft money donations. But let's assume for a second that he's not being cagey and that he really isn't going to donate, which wouldn't surprise me because in order to help them financially, he doesn't have to donate. Like he, even though he's got gazillions of dollars, if it were me, that's not the ask I would lead with if I were them. I would ask for him to use the platform that he owns and abuses to help raise money and to basically do what is the equivalent of having, what are you going to do with the money? You're going to use it as a persuasion and organization tool, right? Well, you can absolutely use Twitter for that. I mean, Trump used Twitter for that last time around, but now he's not really using Twitter. So look at the stuff he's done. When wasn't it DeSantis who, when he announced he did it as it was
like a town hall. It was a mess
on Twitter, right? Okay. Well, clearly he's got a willingness to do that. I'm damn near guaranteeing you that he will host live events on Twitter with Trump, that he won't offer to do it with Biden, or if he does, it won't be, an offer that is meant in any sort of way other than a trap. He can use his enormous platform just through his Twitter account to say things about Biden, which he's going to continue to do. I'm sure that they're going to provide him with messaging.
Well, here's my hot take on this. It's all being framed as if Trump needs Musk, but actually, I think Musk needs Trump because, Musk was basically begging Mr. Beast to get on the platform because he wants engagement. There are people who've been fleeing X, Twitter, whatever. I think as he heads into this presidential season, nothing would be better for Musk and X.
That's a great point.
And if Trump were to engage on that platform, but Trump is trying to sell his stake in Truth Social. So I think he's been reluctant to engage on X because it kind of dilutes I mean, what is Truth Social other than just Trump's messages, right? When do we ever talk about it other than with Trump's messages? So if Trump starts posting on both platforms, it immediately makes Truth Social less valuable. And this shows that when it comes to Trump thinking about his electoral success in his campaign and his personal financial gain, he's always going to pick personal financial gain. The big question, though, is if Trump starts to think like he has to engage on X to win the campaign, because it's not just about winning the White House, it's about staying out of jail, I bet he'll start figuring out ways to engage on X if he thinks it's really in his electoral interest.
It's a great point. I mean, he's probably in a hurry to sell his stake in Truth Social. One, because it's probably not doing as well as he hoped. Two, he needs money to pay these judgments, to pay his lawyers. And three, because as soon as he divests himself from it, he can go back to X where there's more people. It's a great point. And I'm sure that's exactly what we'll see as soon as he gets out of it. Yeah, I could see that. So, yeah, I think Musk tweeting out like, oh, I'm not going to be a part of it. I'm not going to donate. Like, one, who among the rich people you've ever met isn't looking for an excuse to not be able to donate to campaigns. Like, I mean, he's no different than anybody else.
I'm not, and I have my built-in excuse. I say to people, I give through Arena, and you go through the Arena process, which the Arena people, I'm sure they love, is I'm always constantly shuttling candidates over to them for them to say no to them. But that's just my way of handling these types of things, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Well, meanwhile, before we get into the legal stuff, we should talk about the other thing that broke, I think, this morning or last night, which is Kirsten Sinema is exiting she's leaving, right? She's leaving the Senate race for re-election in
I mean, we could
Arizona?
say she's leaving the Senate or she's entering private equity. I don't know how we want to frame this, you know. Look, I will say this. Actually, I can't think of anything really nice to say, but you know, she and Manchin delivered judges, right? So I think we can always say that. Now, the difference between her and Manchin is Manchin was literally the only human being on planet Earth who could maintain the seat in West Virginia, and there are plenty of people who could have kept us a seat in Arizona. And her turn, like, she ran one way and governed a different way, whereas Manchin has always been Manchin. I think we can complain about Manchin all we want, but he's been pretty transparent about who he is, and that matches. In many ways, he's to the left of the electorate in West Virginia, so like he's the best we could get. Sinema, I've always treated differently.
I've told this story before. When she ran for the Senate, I supported Sinema. I had met with her before. She seemed not like the person that we've seen over the last few years. I haven't talked to her in since she decided that she was going to not just tack to the center, but kind of center right in some ways. And the reason it's not something that I think history will look back and find all that credible is because she was also at one point like a Green Party person. Like, she's moved really far. And so I think it's great that she's getting out of a race that she can't win, because it keeps the race from being so muddied. And now we have a very clear choice in Arizona between Ruben Gallego, who's a good friend of mine. He's been on this show before, is a fantastic candidate, will be a fantastic senator, and Kerry Lake. Talk about a clear choice. It doesn't mean he's definitely going to win. People shouldn't write this one off at all. And I would say to do grab an oar early, it's a good reason to go today and donate to Ruben. But it's a very clear choice, and a clear choice is generally a good thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have a special guest to discuss what I think are 6 or 7 major developments in the world of Trump legal when we get back.
I'm always on the lookout for immune strength during cold and flu season. I just discovered an incredible product, Armra Colostrum. Now my immune health has never been stronger. I recently began using Armra Colostrum because I need something to help strengthen my gut barrier, protecting against toxins, chemicals, and pollutants that drive inflammation. Colostrum, anybody who's had kids knows, is the first nutrition that we receive in life, and it's an exclusive source of all the essential nutrients that we need in order to thrive. Armra Colostrum is sustainably sourced and is a proprietary concentrate of bovine colostrum that harnesses over 400 functional nutrients to strengthen your immune barriers, your body's inside suit of armor, and first line of defense against harmful particles from the environment that can trigger inflammation and make you sick. Armra Colostrum strengthens immunity, ignites metabolism, fortifies gut health, promotes hair growth and skin radiance, and powers fitness, performance, and recovery. Armra Colostrum strengthens all 4 layers of your gut wall, where 80% of your immune cells are housed. When the immune barriers of your gut are compromised, you are left vulnerable. The body's gut wall system is your critical line of defense against particles from the environment that can make you sick. Armra Colostrum strengthens all 4 layers of the gut wall system naturally, optimizing your microbiome, fortifying your gut wall architecture, and replenishing your army of immune cells, securing your highest integrity gut health and immune defense. It's a rich, exclusive source of immunoglobulins, which are antibodies that optimize your immune defense during cold and flu season. I take 3 to 4 scoops of Armra Colostrum a day. You can increase it as desired for amplified defense. And as a whole food, there's no such thing as too much. We've worked out a special offer for our audience. You receive 15% off your first order. Go to tryarmra.com/majority or enter majority to get 15% off your first order. That's TRYARMRA.com/majority. roan.com/majority.
This episode is sponsored by Roan. If you're like me, you understand the pains of finding what to wear. Most clothes are uncomfortable. They may be too tight. They never, actually fit your size because, a lot of us are not exactly small, medium, large, extra large. We're complicated. Sometimes when you find something you like, you can only wear it for a few hours before that important meeting or dinner, and then you have to change it into something else. And everyone wants to dress their best. You want to look good at all times. And frankly, it's a confidence booster. So here's the deal. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Roan stepped up to the challenge. Roan's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man, and here's why. Roan helps you get ready for any occasion with the commuter collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, and polos. You never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Roan commuter collection. And here's some anecdote. I'm wearing my Roan pants right now. And last week I was at a wedding. I wore my Roan button-down shirt to the wedding at a formal wedding, and I will also wear it tomorrow when I just go into a coffee shop to have a meeting. It's that versatile. So it's time to feel confident without the hassle. With Roan's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. Yeah, I actually not so neatly folded that shirt in my bag for the wedding, and I was able to take it out, and automatically I was able to put it on. It looked like I had ironed it, but I didn't. It's an inside secret between us. So with Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll also be smelling fresh and clean all day. On top of that, Roan is 100% machine washable, so you can dish the dry cleaner all together. We're on the move a lot, and the Roan commuter collection has never let me down. The versatility and overall comfort of the collection is undefeated. I absolutely love it. And even after I wear it all day, I feel super fresh because that Gold Fusion anti-odor technology. At that wedding, I was dancing up a storm, wore it, no problems. So the commuter collection can get you through any work day and straight into whatever comes next. So head to roan.com/majority and use the promo code majority to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/majority and use the code majority. It's time to find your corner office comfort.
Okay, we are ready for a very special edition of Trump Legal Law and Order. There's the sound. There it is. And to help us do that, we're going to be joined here by Tristan Snell. Tristan is a renowned lawyer and legal commentator who, as an assistant attorney general in New York, prosecuted Trump University successfully. He's the founder and managing partner of MainStreet.law and is actively engaged in legal discourse on MSNBC and NPR, as well as social media platforms, including Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and Twitter. His new book is Taking Down Trump, 12 Rules for Prosecuting Donald Trump by Someone Who Did It Successfully. So, Tristan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jason. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, before we get into the very full news of the week in the world of Trump's boutique law firm that is, well, it's like a large defense firm that is involved now in the world of just defending Trump. Let's talk about the book for a second. I know it's basically in three parts. Because we are largely in a lot of these cases through the investigation section of these cases, and you write a lot about how to handle sort of the court of public opinion, so to speak. So, and we've talked about that a lot on this show, like how the different prosecutors in these cases are handling the way this is playing out in public. So could you just talk a little bit about like what you learned about how to handle Trump, the politician, when you're treating him as Trump, the defendant?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and that is exactly what you have to do here. It was Trump, even before it was Trump the politician, it was Trump the tabloid denizen. Like, you had to deal with, like, what was he going to do with the publicity that he could bring to bear? Even before he ran for office, he was going to be able to get national media attention for pretty much anything he did. So, and that's important because it means that even when he's losing in the courtroom, he can try to expand the scope of conflict to try to play to the court of public opinion. And then the new factor that wasn't true as much 10 years ago when we went after him for the Trump U case is that now he's got the MAGA base being able to pony up money to keep him going. So they're all the ones funding all of these legal defenses via the Save America PAC in particular. Now, let's put aside whether or not that's actually legal, because I don't really know that it is, but I'm not an election law expert. But he's doing that too. So what's he doing here? Let's just say, let's look at what he did when you had the E. Jean Carroll case, which I cover a lot in the book, as well as the New York AG civil fraud case, which I also cover a good bunch. In both of those cases, Trump came into court a lot. He wasn't really able to score legal points, but he was there to do a couple of things. One, he was trying to provoke the judges in question into overreacting and then possibly doing something that he could use to appeal the matter. That really didn't work. He didn't really get Judge Engoron or Judge Kaplan to go totally berserk and do something that's going to result in a successful appeal. He then was trying to really play to the media and play to the crowd so that he could get donations and try to get the media to both sides it. And he had more success with those things. Obviously, he's continued to raise money, although his numbers are terrible too. Like the PAC has been hemorrhaging money and not really bringing nearly as much in as it was before. So he's had really a terrible time continuing to raise money there. But that's what he was doing when he was going to New York. Those were fundraising visits. They were photo ops for him to show up at a courthouse, look like he was the victim, and then self-pityingly ask his fans for money. And then he was trying to get the media to cover this as a very both sides kind of thing, which they largely bit the bait on that one. What you have to remember as you go up against him when he's doing these things is don't pay attention to most of that stuff, because that's just going to be a distraction. What you want to do is focus on your facts, your law, your arguments. Your job there is to be a steamroller. A steamroller does not have feelings. A steamroller does not get distracted. A steamroller keeps steamrolling. That is what you need to be. And by and large, that is what both E. Jean Carroll's lawyers and the New York AG's office did in those cases this winter. And they got really successful outcomes as a result.
And Tristan, this was a pretty busy week in the world of Trump legal. So just a few.
We're only
things
halfway through the week.
I know it's crazy.
It's
Well,
Wednesday.
just thinking about the last 7 days. Just the last 7 days. Last 7 days, the Supreme Court restored Trump to the ballot. They took up cert on the immunity case. There were two critical hearings at the end of last week in Florida and Georgia involving those two cases. Trump's CFO pled guilty to perjury. The Alvin Bragg case was set for jury selection March 25th, and subpoenas were issued in Arizona in the fake elector scheme there. That is busy. Let's start with the Supreme Court. So was there anything notable to you? So the Supreme Court restored Trump to the ballot. This was, they took just 25 days after oral argument and issued an unsigned opinion. There was some disagreement among the justices on the fine print of, essentially the three liberal justices plus Amy Coney Barrett felt like the court went too far in saying that only an act of Congress could disqualify somebody based on the insurrection clause. Was there anything notable there? Like, was that surprising to you in any way?
I had thought that they would go for an even more narrow yes and no. Yes, I was not. Yes, it went as I expected in that they were going to try to find the narrowest grounds possible to get rid of the case. They did do that. Like, they didn't actually. What's really at issue in this matter is somewhere in there, somebody ideally making a determination as to whether or not there was an insurrection and Trump engaged in it. That is the factual crux of that matter. The Supreme Court didn't touch it, and I didn't think that they would. They found a much narrower grounds that they all could agree on to get rid of the case and make it go away. I was a little surprised at the grounds on which they did so, because they really made something up. Like they could have gotten rid of this simply by saying, like, the factual record is not developed enough. We're going to send it back to Colorado for further proceedings. I think that they didn't do that because then they were worried that it was going to open up a Pandora's box of a whole bunch of different states that having trials about this, and they just wanted to avoid it. But the problem is that their way to avoid that outcome was to make up language that isn't actually in the Constitution. And I should have known better than to think that they wouldn't do something like that, but they did. So there's nothing in, you can go read it for yourself. Just go online and go read it for yourself. Everybody, like, it's not, people think, oh, it's the Constitution. Oh, I'm not qualified. They didn't, and I know it was a long time ago. And so the language is a little bit stilted by today's standards, but a lot of it's very readable. And you can think for yourself with a high school education about whether or not these things mean what the court says it means.
Right.
There was not, there's nothing in there that said Congress has to pass a law to do it. It simply says, if you break your oath by engaging in insurrection, then you can't run for office again. That's it. You're ineligible. That's what it says.
Which, by the way, is a pretty practical thing to put in the Constitution.
You think it's a pretty good thing to have in there,
What's interesting is,
Makes sense.
if a lot of these people didn't claim to be originalists, I would be a little bit more sympathetic, because then they would be like, all right, for practical concerns, we think it's not practical for every state elections officer in the country to make this determination. So therefore we're going to bring new light to the old language. But Clarence Thomas signed on to this, right? So it's
correct.
And this is in line with this court, which is they're originalists when it suits them. But on certain things like major questions doctrine, Chevron, things that we've talked a little bit about on this podcast, they're not originalists. Now, there's another. So just putting that one away, effectively, this means that challenges to Trump's ballot access, et cetera, they're gone. Interestingly, though, they also issued this one-page order granting cert on the immunity questions, and this created a huge debate about whether the court was being political or not in helping Trump. They set oral arguments for the week of April 22nd. It looks like it'll probably be April 25th. And so some people are saying that this was, and also it took them a little while to get here. Some people are saying that the court's doing Trump a solid. There are other people who are arguing that, hey, they actually could have, they did some weird procedural wrangling to even hear it this session. They could have taken their time and heard it next session. I'm in a sane world, I would give a benefit of the doubt to the court, but I'm not sure this court has earned the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, we might feel differently about all of these things if it weren't for the very credible allegations of ethical impropriety and corruption on the court. Maybe I would be a little bit more inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I'd feel a little bit more inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt if it weren't for one of the justices having a spouse who was at the very best a material witness in the insurrection and at worst was the participant. Looking at you, Ginny Thomas. So, maybe I'd give them more of a benefit of the doubt if it weren't for a few of those things with Thomas and Alito and some others. However, all of that said, I got to be honest. That was one of those things where, I spent as a lot of y'all probably did. I was despondent for a couple of days there, and maybe some people still are. The good news, though, was, and I think you're probably about to get to this, is that we found out about how the DOJ is going to be interpreting the 60-day rule. Was that coming up on your list? Because that
actually,
you're about to say something.
Oh,
yeah, this is why you're here. School us on this.
That's why I'm here. I finally add value. It's great. All right. So so the kicker is that I spent multiple days actually, the night the day that happened, the day that came down, it's like the end of the night. We put the kids to bed, and I'm, and my wife is seeing me there on the, starting to get ready to watch some television and go to bed. And she's like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And it was just like, I mean, I wasn't crying, but it was I was a wreck. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to go. I'm feeling way worse about everything this year, blah, blah, blah. And she didn't really know what to do with me. So that was probably the right move. Was just kind of let me sit and be sad for a bit. But then I got a lot better by the end of the week. And here's why. In the Florida case, which hasn't actually generated much good news, we got a little bit of good news inadvertently, because DOJ made it clear to Judge Cannon that so DOJ has this 60-day rule that many of you are probably familiar with, which says, and it's an internal DOJ policy. I don't really know if I agree with it, but it is what it is. It says that the DOJ will not go after a criminal target that's a candidate for federal office within 60 days of federal election. We were unsure if that was necessarily going to apply to the Trump situation, given that he's already been indicted. DOJ wonderfully made it clear that it does not apply to somebody who's already been indicted. So what does this practically mean? It means that the Trump federal trials, the January 6th trial and the classified documents trial, can in fact continue during September and October. Here's why that's important, going back to the Supreme Court thing. The Supreme Court thing opens up this terrible specter that we might not have clarity on that immunity issue until the end of June, because that's the end of the term. Thankfully, it won't go beyond that, because SCOTUS really, really likes having its summer vacation. So they're done June 30th. It's over. They're going to issue a decision. I'm hoping it'll happen even sooner. I'm hoping they'll actually turn something around sometime in May. That would be wonderful if they did so. They should, because this is a matter of national importance. But God only knows if they're going to go there. It may be that they take their sweet time and draft some really long opinion, and we don't get it until the end of June. And then the worry was that that was going to preclude us from having those trials this year at all, because we probably have another 2 months worth of pre-trial discovery and other stuff to get ready for trial. That would put a trial in like just after, maybe September 1, around Labor Day. And then, it's the 60-day rule. We have to stop what we're doing, and we're not allowed to do anything against Trump the rest of until after November. That would be a terrible outcome. Instead, we have the possibility that the DC case, even in a worst case scenario, could still start trial in early September. So I think the odds of this potentially still resulting in Trump getting tried and convicted before the election, the odds went way down after that SCOTUS thing, and then they went back up by the end of the week. But that good news barely got any media attention, because I think it was a little too inside baseball.
Okay, let me ask this, though. We are all talking about this as though, and I can understand why, as though it is a inevitability that the Supreme Court is going to say that presidents are not immune. I just have to ask, is there a chance in your mind that this bunch of hacks are going to be like, yeah, presidents can do whatever they want. They're kings. I mean, at this point, we have to ask.
Yeah, we do have to ask the question for sure. So, look, we know.
I can't figure out what their legal justification for that would be, but still.
I mean, they could go along. Look, Trump's argument is going to be that a president does not have a free rein to do what he or she needs to do if they have the specter of getting sued or prosecuted for it after they leave office. That's going to be his fundamental argument. And the problem is it has just enough of a patina of plausibility that it has to be treated like a serious argument. And I think the court is bending over backwards to try to look like they're giving him every benefit of the doubt. I love how that doesn't apply to anybody else, though. It's just always kid gloves for him, and it's kid gloves for him, and haymakers for everybody else. But it's a very different story. It is possible. There's no it is possible with this court, and you can't say that it could happen. Now, how are they going to adopt that position and say, yep, that is for anything that was an official act? And they'll try to then say, well, was this an official act? And maybe they'll decide that too, or maybe they'll kick it back down to this could be a really awful outcome that I'll just give everybody, is he kicks it back down to Judge Chutkan to determine whether or not you then have to have a case within a case to determine whether what he did was an official act of his office or not. Oh,
I think that's the
God.
most likely
that would be
outcome,
awful. You
I
really
feel like
you
that's
think?
Yeah, because the way this is the question presented to the court.
I
This is
know
how they frame
I
it.
don't like the way they
Yeah.
did it. Yeah.
Yeah, they said whether and to what extent does a former president enjoy presidential immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct alleged to involve official acts during his tenure in office. Alleged to involve. So what they're going to say is if it was an official act, there's immunity. If there wasn't an official act, there is no immunity. Now go figure out whether it was an official act or not.
And then we're going
I
to
think
have a
almost
whole
certain.
trial within the trial to go figure out
Hold
whether or
on.
not it was. Yeah.
Are they going to say that, or is it worse? Are they going to say we can't rule until it is determined whether or not it is an official act? Which then, because Chutkin's going to say it wasn't an official act, and then it's got to go back up. So there's a lot of ways they can still run this clock. But
yep, that's true.
Either way, it sounds like you're saying there is still a decent chance that he is in the, October surprise sort of period, that the surprise is, hey, you're in federal court fighting for your life. That's possible.
Yeah, because of the 60-day thing really opened up that possibility again. But you guys are right that like SCOTUS could throw a really nasty surprise at us. And I think we just outlined one that they could stop short of saying, oh yeah, presidents are kings. They can do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. They could then say, oh, we're going to split the hairs. And we're going to say, well, if it was an official act, then he's immune. And if it was not an official act, then he's not immune. And then we're going to have this whole thing about whether or not it was an official act. For him to call up Brad Raffensperger and try to like twist his arm, is that an official act? For him to twist Mike Pence's arm into violating his oath of office and engaging in procedural improprieties, was that an official act? Probably not. But like then we're going to sit and like go back and forth about that 15 million times. And yes, then this case doesn't go to trial until 2025.
Well,
that's the
a
problem.
couple of other things that happened that week. There were dueling hearings going on in the southeastern United States. One in Georgia over Fani Willis and the allegations of impropriety against her. Judge Scott McAfee wrapped up hearings there. He could issue a ruling any moment now on that. And also down in Florida, there was a hearing over the timing of the documents case that you referenced earlier in front of Judge Aileen Cannon. The Jack Smith was arguing for a July date. Trump's attorneys asked for a date beginning in August, but then they also alternatively asked for it to be punted after the election. Any predictions on those? I think most court watchers I've read seem to think McAfee will probably sanction Willis at most, but probably not remove her. But Cannon, nobody really knows. Like obviously, there's a lot of sort of smoke there in terms of her bias. But do you have any predictions of either of those two cases?
I would be very surprised. Look, I don't think it's impossible that McAfee, who has already shown a lot of poor judgment here, might go all the way and do something drastic with regard to Willis. But the idea that there's no question about about her having a conflict of interest within the confines of the case. Like, what do you really get disqualified for? You get disqualified because an attorney in a case can't also be a witness in a case. So if it comes up, where do people really get disqualified for it? It's because they have some other real interest in the case that potentially clouds their ability to handle this properly, or that would call into question their role in the matter. That's where you get disqualifications. So it could be things like, she's a witness because she also was involved in, they pressured her too with regard to the election. So she could get called as a witness. So she's disqualified. There's nothing like that here. Any impropriety that she may have engaged in is an HR problem between her and the government and people of Fulton County, Georgia. That's what that is. So yeah, could she, I don't even think she should get sanctioned. Could McAfee try to sanction her for the appearance of fairness? I guess. But again, like, we're doing all this stuff to sort of go over the top to appear fair to these criminal defendants in a way that would never happen in any other case. So it totally bowls me over on that front. But that's a different story. To Judge Cannon, I actually have come to believe that as much as we've all written off that matter and we've just assumed that it's never going to happen, it could sneak up on us and suddenly happen. I don't think it's crazy. It pains me a bit that now we're losing the May date that had been in the calendar, and that now we're looking at July or August or later. But I am hopeful here that we'll actually have something this summer. I actually think that despite all of the problems with that case, it could go on. And again, that's where the whole 60-day rule thing popped up. It was before Judge Cannon. It was DOJ assuring her, hey, this matter can continue into the fall. There is no, we're not going to have to stop just because we hit the 60-day mark at September 7th or September 6th or whatever, that it's not going to have to pause. So it's possible to actually get a trial started and then finish it. We're not going to have to, from DOJ's perspective, there is no reason to postpone it until after the election. Now, she could still muck it up.
She could have her own 60-day rule, right? She could just be like, I just don't think
continue.
She could, but she could. And then the question is, what does DOJ do to try to go up to the 11th Circuit to try to get that unstuck? Because one thing we have to remember is that the defendant has an interest in a constitutional interest in a speedy trial, but so does the public. And so the government can argue that, look, this is actually this is not correct. This is unconstitutional. We're having a delayed trial. The public has an interest in a speedy trial. We need to actually get this going. So they could potentially push back on that. But I'm not that hopeful. But I also think that, interestingly, the case that we've written off might actually be the one that goes on sooner. And now I wouldn't even be surprised that the Florida case could happen before the DC case. I definitely didn't think that 10 days ago, and now I do.
Well, speaking of that, let's end on the case that survives all of this, which is the New York case, where we all started, which is with Alvin Bragg and Stormy Daniels hush money. That case is set for jury selection on March 25th, and this is a New York State case. So all the sort of shenanigans that we just talked about don't apply here. This is a case with 34 counts of falsifying business records. Notably, though, these don't, and you can help us, school us on this, these don't necessarily have to carry prison time. How do you weigh this case? What do you think happens here?
So the kicker is that the falsifying business records, it's no doubt factually that it happened, right? They took the hush money payments, Michael Cohen paid them, then they falsified records, making it look like Cohen had rendered legal services, and then paid Cohen back were things that looked like legal bills, but were in fact repaying him for the hush money he paid. And he did all of this in October 2016, right before the 2016 election. The question under New York law is, falsifying business records is a misdemeanor if it's done on its own. It is a felony if it is done in service of another crime. And that is what the Manhattan DA's office is going to be arguing. And they've got multiple different possible other crimes that could be the other crime to point to there. Now, this could end up being something that we see action on at the trial, or it could be that we really see the bigger action on that on appeal, because it may be that the jury is simply going to be, we're still trying to see what's going to happen in practice with this. It may be that the real action on this is what happens to this case on appeal. And in the meantime, look, let's just say there's a conviction, then Trump appeals it, then the real battle will be joined at the appellate courts in New York State about whether or not those convictions should be sentenced as misdemeanors or felonies. And in the meantime, Trump's probably not in prison pending the appeals. They probably will not have him be detained. So it could be a long time before those appeals play out. So we could end up with a situation where, yes, he gets convicted, but then we're not really sure what the outcome is. And we don't end up finding out until 2025 is sadly what would probably happen with that.
Well, but you're saying he'd be convicted and potentially sentenced, but the sentence would be on appeal.
Yes, and then we'll see. And regardless of which way that sentence goes, it's going to get appealed. So the real and yeah.
But what's interesting about that is, and you're addressing this correctly as a lawyer. Now let me be the recovering lawyer who's thinking about it like a politician. That means at that point, Trump cannot argue with the statement that he is a convicted criminal who has been sentenced to jail time, who is appealing to try to stay out of jail. Like that is true. At that point, his political posture, which is
that would be true. Or he could be, the way to think of this is, it's sort of like in a sports game where it's, the ruling on the field it was an incomplete pass, and then
replay review.
And then, it's whether or not it's going to get overturned on review. What's the ruling on the field? What does the judge do at the trial level in terms of how this gets sentenced? Because it could be the other way around, where then Trump gets to be like, haha, it was a misdemeanor. And yes, the Manhattan DA's office is being predatory, trying to turn this into a felony on appeal, but I will prevail. So
is there any
politically, I don't know that this one's going to do as much damage to him as one might hope. But I also think that it's a valid case. It should have happened years ago, and it should go forward. And I actually do think that the New York courts will ultimately say that there were other crimes attached to that falsification, and that thereby they are felonies. I do believe eventually he's going to go to prison for this.
Is there any chance that the Supreme Court, or the Court of Appeals, I think is what we call the Supreme Court here in New York, that they, because of the equities involved in this, like hear it faster and skip the other appellate courts?
They could. I hope so. You're absolutely right. Look, there's an argument to be made there to say that because of the fact that he's running, I just feel like, I think they're probably, my hunch is that they're not going to, because it isn't really, while it isn't national interest, it's not really in the state's interest to do that. Because at that point, the prosecution can't even argue, but then if he wins the presidency, he can pardon himself, because he can't pardon himself for state crimes.
But here's the argument I would make. I would make the argument that we won't be able to get him in custody if he's president of the United States. It would create a constitutional crisis.
I like that. That's good. I like that. That's a good argument. Yeah, you're right. That would be a good argument. That physically speaking, if he's in the White House and surrounded by Secret Service, we will not be able to take him into custody. And that thereby
I just say the dude's a Florida resident and a flight risk.
Yeah,
that too. All of it.
But
he has his own goddamn plane. Like, how does that not make him a flight risk? Come on.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see. I think it's going to be interesting to see if we can get faster appeals out of the New York courts generally, because the civil fraud case is going to have the same problem, where the normal appeal schedule is glacial. Can there be some way that you speed it up? In that case, it would be by arguing that he's already been trying to alienate assets and reconstitute his organizations in other states. And if we give him more time, he will have more time to engage in those kind of shenanigans and evade accountability and evade the judgment. But I guess we'll see.
Well, this has been great, Tristan. Thank you. It's Tristan Snell. The book is Taking Down Trump: 12 Rules for Prosecuting Donald Trump by Someone Who Did It Successfully. Thanks again for joining us. We don't do guests that often anymore, so it's a special treat, and I think it was great for the audience. Tell folks where they can find you on social.
I'm at Tristan Snell on most things: Twitter, Threads, Instagram, and at Tristan Snell 212 on TikTok. I am sneak preview about to be launching a Substack that's coming kind of any week now. So be on the lookout for that as well. Lots more stuff coming soon. And the book is at takingdowntrump.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much. Thank you to the Midas Mighty, as always. And everybody, remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.